Liam Crowley with comicbook.com here with one of the stars of the Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't even want to just say volume 3. I want to say franchise because that's what
Okay.
this thing is at this point. Mr. Sean Gunn. Sean, thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh yeah, sure thing. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I wanted to start by going back to San Diego Comic-Con last year because you've put me on such an emotional journey with this movie for almost a full calendar year now. And that's because when you took that Hall H stage, and I have your quote here, you said, pardon my French, we care. We do. It extends to all of us. It's the most beautiful thing when all of your colleagues are on the same page. Kind of just talk to me about having that quote set off this marketing campaign, if you will, and having it all come full circle now to where we actually are in the final stages. What do those emotions feel like?
Um, yeah, it's been an emotional journey for me, and I meant what I said there. I think that one of the things that has made these movies special is how we've really come together as a group of collaborators to make something that we all feel really passionately about. It's a story that I think everyone feels is worth telling. A lot of that is a testament to my brother James, but yeah, it's been a defining characteristic of our little ragtag group of heroes that we care about what we're doing. We're not just like punching the clock and like trying to see what kind of trying to see what we can crank out. We're like saying, hey, this movie's worth making.
Hell yeah. And it's evident on screen because the journey that this film took me on as an audience member, I'll never get that experience again. That's not something you can buy. That's not something you can fake. And it's really, really special. And that's what I wanted to ask you about too, with the character of Rocket specifically. You pull double duty in just about every comic book project you're in,
I know.
with Kraglin and Rocket. Rocket's origin is something that feels like has been in the works for years in terms of at least like a kind of structure of what we were going to get to when we eventually did decide to explore it. How long have you known about where Rocket came from?
I've known it pretty much from the very beginning. The James told me when we were shooting the first movie, what Rocket's backstory was, where he was from, his relationship to the High Evolutionary, and it's all stayed pretty consistent. I didn't know 100% of the details, but I knew more or less where he came from, when we, you know, early into the process of shooting the first movie.
It's really cool to hear because I wanted to ask you about this fan theory I've seen circulating on Twitter recently, and that's that Rocket has a fascination from the first movie with prosthetic limbs. He asks for the prosthetic leg in the first movie. He asks for Bucky's arm in Infinity War. He
Oh
has
yeah.
Thor's, fake eye just ready and waiting in his bag or whatever. Is that because of his relationship with Teefs and Floor and Lila? Is that a sympathetic thing that he's like trying to collect prosthetic limbs for that reason?
Wow, you're springing that one on me. I had not heard that yet. I like the theory. It is not something that I can say was consciously discussed or talked about in the creation of the movies, but it does add up. It makes some sense, right? I mean, I've always thought of Rocket's fascination with those things more just an overall fascination with technology and with things he wants to. If there's a gadget that can do something that he doesn't quite understand, he needs to understand it and consume it and see what it is that how it all works. Which is always kind of how I thought of it. But yeah, maybe there's some kind of fetishization there. I don't know.
There's some sort of underlying thing, like it's a cool like friendship thing to me. That's what brings it all together. And those
Yeah.
kind of like fan theory headcanons, when they're able to actually make sense, they elevate these movies, which is really, really special. You mentioned though, knowing Rocket's at least a vague picture of his origins since 2014 when the first movie came out. When it came to hard defining it as the years went on, did you have any specific creative input, or was that all James?
It's pretty much all James. I mean, we split up our jobs pretty cleanly. And James is a creator, and when he's in the script writing stage, he builds a cocoon for himself. And so not that he doesn't then listen to notes and take notes later. He certainly does, but for the most part, I don't ever step in and say, "Hey, I think you should do this," because he won't take my advice. He won't listen anyway. So it's like he kind of does his own thing, and then once I get it, I try to help translate it. But yeah, no, I can't take credit for any of the big ideas.
Mm-hmm. And some of those big ideas too, when it came to his origins, were very like vulgar. Like we saw, or at least there was a lot of implied, torturous stuff going on with those animals. And it has sparked a little bit of a conversation on social media about kind of pushing the boundaries of those PG-13 elements, which, PG-13 means not suitable for children under 13. It doesn't mean you're supposed to bring kids to it necessarily. But I want to ask you about kind of pushing those boundaries and having, the scene when Rocket scratches off the High Evolutionary's face, even though we don't see it, with the noises and everything, it's very heavily implied. Was there ever a conversation about whether it was being pushed too far, maybe not doing enough in terms of showing those kind of more serious elements to Rocket's origins?
I think that we were all pretty much on board with where it was, with where the script was when we started filming the movie and telling the story. I think it's important to note that when you're talking about if a movie's PG-13, there's not just the 13, there's also the PG, which means parental guidance, which means that there's some guidance from an adult who's sort of explaining some of the things to you. And anytime I see a criticism of the movie that there was too much animal cruelty, my first thought is, gosh, if you think there's a lot of animal cruelty in this movie, wait till you see how much there is in the actual world that you live in. And I don't. I think I'm not sure you could find a big movie, at least a big budget sort of tentpole movie that is a greater advocate for animal rights than this movie is. And I think that it's something that I know my brother feels strongly about, and I do too. The fact that there's some that there's some hard things to look at in the movie, and I don't think I never think it goes overboard with what's shown, certainly on screen. But yeah, some of it's hard, some of it's a little traumatic, and that's because it's realistic in a way, and it's and when characters have trauma in their backstories, we don't just want to wash over that. There's Rocket's story is sad, and he's not just wisecracking because he's funny. He has a hard time liking anybody, much less loving anyone, and that comes from somewhere. There's a reason for that. So we need to dig into that stuff. That's what we do as storytellers and as artists and creators. And so, yeah, I can't answer every criticism off the top of my head, but I would certainly be willing to have that debate with anyone who wanted to have it.
Mm-hmm. I will say, as soon as I saw this movie for the first time, I went home and I hugged my dog because my dog has known nothing but health and protection and love her entire life. She has never been faced with a narcissistic evolutionary sociopath. However, I see her eyes and I see what Rocket went through, and I'm like, I will protect you to the end of this world. And if that's what we can get out of this movie, people showing even more love for their pets than they already do. Right. I think that's a huge, huge win. I want to switch gears, though, to your actual live action character, that being Kraglin. Is the Yaka arrow the best weapon in the MCU?
It's pretty cool. It's certainly unique, right? I am honored to be able to take the helm for the Yaka arrow. I don't know. It's not a competition, but it's certainly a heck of a good weapon. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And we have that one scene, obviously, with Michael Rooker, where you just kind of see him and it gives you that inspiration to be able to master the whistle. What was that day on set like? I don't know how long Rooker was on set for, but did you have any conversations about fully having that torch passed to you? Obviously, you took on the Finn in the previous movie, but now we fully have Kraglin as the master of the Yaka arrow.
I've known Rooker a long time, and so I don't I don't think we needed to have any of those conversations. A lot of it is sort of unspoken, and we've worked together a lot. So I think we're already on the same page when we do that stuff. That day was great. Just seeing Yandu again in the flesh is always wonderful in its own right. And he did a little work on the holiday special as well. So since we shot the two things concurrently, he was there. We were also able to work together on the opening scene of the holiday special. So it's always great / horrible having Rooker around.
Hell yeah, that's really cool to hear. In the post-credit scene, you have a pretty prominent role because we have a new Guardians lineup, and we don't know exactly when those Guardians are going to return. But I want to ask you, in terms of going through that lineup and deciding who is going to be in this new team of Guardians. I think back to Avengers: Age of Ultron when we see the final moment of Steve Rogers assembling his new crew, and we heard early drafts of maybe Captain Marvel being in there or other different characters popping in and out. The Guardians that we see on screen in that post-credit scene. Was that always the idea for the team, or did they go through multiple drafts during the process?
No, that was it from the first draft that I saw. It was the team that we see there at the end, and so I've been carrying that with me a long time as well. I've known that for years. That's the group that we're gonna sort of see. I'm like you. I don't know when we might see that group again, or if ever, who knows? You never kind of know where things are going to go. But it's a pretty powerful group, though. I like their abilities as a unit. That's for sure.
Yeah, in the little bit we got to see of them in action together, it seems like they're going to be a formidable force. And I love the fact that we have that open-endedness of continuing with these characters, even if we don't know where they're going to go, because they all made it out alive, which is something that took me by total surprise, because James had been talking for months about how there's going to be some permanence to volume 3, and there was from a storytelling perspective, but we didn't have any character deaths. And we heard James, he had an interview with one of my colleagues, Brandon Davis, a couple weeks ago, where he mentioned that Gamora was going to die in volume 2 before they decided to take her in a different direction in Infinity War. So did any Guardians were any Guardians scheduled to die in this movie that ended up having to get changed because of things?
We certainly didn't go out of our way to dissuade any rumors about deaths, because you don't want people knowing where stuff is going. But to my knowledge, nobody was ever well, I know James toyed with it at various times. So it was like maybe so and so would die, and then it just in the course of kind of figuring out the story, it just didn't make sense for anyone. And I like where everyone lands, and it's true. There's a finality of sorts for a lot of the characters without death, which is pretty interesting to me too.
Yeah, it is very cool. James, obviously, his future now lies in DC. And you also have a future in DC. You were in the Suicide Squad as Calendar Man and as Weasel. And we know Weasel's coming back, at least in animated form, with Creature Commandos. You also got G.I. Robot in that ensemble as well. And we heard the full ensemble recently in terms of the voice actors that are going to make up the Creature Commandos. Have you had the chance to chat with, David Harbour, Frank Grillo, in terms of, just getting on the same page before that thing shoots?
No, that's a crazy thing about animation, is that a lot of times you don't really get to see your colleagues very much, because you're mostly recording separately. We've done a little recording so far. I know Frank and David have done some recording a little bit, and I love the scripts. They're so freaking cool. And I can't say much other than we do get to learn a little more about the Weasel, which is pretty interesting. And yeah, you mentioned G.I. Robot, who is a character that's very near and dear to my heart. I grew to love him in the course of kind of working on the character, because he has one reason, one purpose, and that's to hate and to kill as many Nazis as possible. And as someone who personally hates fascism in all its forms, who doesn't hate Nazis? I love playing a character that hates Nazis. It's pretty cool.
That's going to be a fun one to add to your arsenal. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. James is obviously directing Superman Legacy. He said recently that some Guardians actors will be among that ensemble. Is that something you would want to even add to your plate? Because you already have so much going on in the DC universe. But if the phone rang for Superman Legacy, would you be interested?
I when James calls, I generally pick up the phone. So we'll see what happens there. It's one of the things about working with my brother over the years is that we, when the situation is right, the project is right, we work together. And sometimes it isn't, and we don't, or I'm busy and it just doesn't work out, or what, however. And so I don't worry about it too much. I root for everything that he creates. I guess I can say that I don't think he was talking about me when he was talking about regarding the character and Superman. So, but they're pretty early in that process. So you never know. I mean, we always kind of like figure it out as it goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of exciting things to look forward to in the future. We obviously mentioned that we don't know when the Guardians will come back, if they'll come back, whether it will be in a Guardians Volume 4 or a spin-off project. But I wanted to ask you, since this team is so rooted in James Gunn's creativity, have you even thought about the idea of having a Guardians project with you in it being directed by someone else?
I never close any doors as an actor. In my career, I'm always open to what might happen next. I've always kind of gotten the sense that when you think one thing is going to happen, generally it doesn't. It'll go another direction. So I don't really know. I mean, I don't think about doing a Guardians project with a different director, but I don't anticipate that my brother's going to be directing any more Guardians movies. He certainly wouldn't in the near future. I think we'd have to be old men. But if more projects rise up, I would certainly be open to seeing what they are and taking a look and seeing how it goes. I mean, it's like comic books, right? I mean, you can have a great comic book series for a group of characters and then it ends. And that doesn't mean you throw those characters away. You can have another series that's just as interesting. But it's not going to be just as interesting if they're trying to copy the previous series, right? So there's always a fluidity to storytelling that I'm open to. If like I said, if when James calls, I pick up the phone. Well, the same is true for Kevin and Lou. So if Kevin Feige and Lou D'Esposito, that if they're working on something and they're interested in working together, well, let's talk about it. Kind of a long-winded way of saying I kind of have no idea.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're all excited for what the future holds. DC, Marvel, Guardians, outside of Guardians. It's going to be very fun. Sean, those are all the questions I have. Thank you so much. And yeah, this movie is phenomenal. I can't wait to see it in a packed theater because the press screening, we had our people.
Oh yeah.
Not enough popcorn, not enough noise. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, man, get out there, see it with a real packed theater. That sounds good.